Hello students, today we will discuss a topic called globalization, which has almost pervaded in all aspects of our life. So we will proceed like this. First we will discuss what is the background of globalization, then we will basically focus on the various kinds of explanation that is related to the meaning of globalization for understanding globalization. So, let us start with the background of globalization. Introduced in the mid 1990s, the term globalization has entered the common usage and become a central issue in public debates in most countries around the world. So, the issue of globalization has become very common. Most of the people use the word very frequently, and in fact, it has become the central issue in public debates in most of the countries. It has come to be associated with controversial social outcomes that have stemmed from an increasingly integrated global economy and the resulting public concern and controversy around the world. So, most of the problems associated with globalization are in the political sphere, are in the economic sphere, and also are in the cultural sphere, but the more problematic impact of globalization has been in the economic sphere because of the integration of global economy and the kind of unequal outcomes it has produced. That has been the major issue for debate, for discussion. Current formulation of globalization includes several antithetical and even mixed concepts such as homogenization, differentiation, then you have hybridization, plurality, localism and relativism, and also some people mixed local with global, and they have coined a new concept called globalization. Globalization is a very fairly new term, particularly Professor Theodore Levitt, a Harvard University professor. He used this term in a research paper in the Harvard Business Review in 1983. Globalization has also become an important, although essentially a very contested concept in the field of international relations and other social science disciplines. So, it is not just a policy issue, rather it has become an important issue in major social science disciplines, maybe it is political science, international relations or other social science disciplines. It is therefore essential to understand what globalization actually means. So, because of its day-to-day use, because of its severe impact both in the policy making area and also in political sphere, economic sphere, cultural sphere, almost in all spheres. So, it is important to know what actually globalization means. So far as the meaning of globalization is concerned, there are three important explanations. The first is called hyper-globalisation, who claims that globalization represents a recent and near complex victory of liberal values and global markets that is tightly integrating states and people around the world. So, the first explanation is given by the hyper-globalist, who look everything, everything nice in globalization. They highlight particularly the virtues of globalization, and they think that it is just a kind of victory of liberal values and global markets after the failure of communism and the collapse of Soviet Union. So, it is a kind of end of history. This will remain forever. Nobody is going to challenge it, because this is the final value, this is the absolute value that would remain valid so long as economy is there, so long as nation states are there, so long as efficiency in the economic model is there. Such researchers argue that globalization is a significant force for human progress. So, it is basically related to the progress of humanity. It is, as I said, it is considered something, the last of any value that we cherish, that we consider something important in our life, in our economy, in our nation state. The second position is very skeptical set of observations that suggest globalization is overstated and largely a myth, because the level of global integration during the early 1990s less than the period between 1870 and 1914. So, the point is many skeptics, they do not think there is something new or innovative about globalization of early 1990s. Rather, the world was more integrated because of colonialization, because of the control over the colonies by the imperial powers. So, the skeptics argue that there is nothing unique in the globalization of early 90s, rather the world was more integrated. If you look at history from the period 1870 to 1914, before exactly the Second World War. Far from being a world where markets have own over the states, the world economy is still shaped by the state to state interaction, and there remain significant differences between the strategic choices made by various states in response to the world economy, and strong states are still able to work the system to their own advantage. The aspect that the globalization has not made the states weaker, rather it is the states who dictate the terms of globalization, and their day to day interaction with other actors, with other states, that clearly prove that they are the people who call the shots, or they are the entities, or they are the political communities, those who call the shots at the global economic and at the domestic level. So skeptics particularly highlight this fact that states have become important actors. So there are other actors, no doubt about that, but states are still the primary actors who call the shots in all political, economic and other issues. Marxists are also skeptical on the grounds that global interconnection are an essential part of the capitalist mode of production. So as we have discussed in the Marxist theory of international relations, so they associate the problem of globalization with the expansion of global capitalism, and it is nothing something innovative, nothing something which we have not known, rather this is the nature of global capitalism, that it will expand, and that may lead to new imperialism and different kind of colonial control over the countries of the global south by the advanced economic countries. They see it as a long standing process, always implicit in capital accumulation rather than a political economic condition that has recently come into being. So it's nothing new, nothing recent, that has been the process. Capitalism has always acquired an accumulative character, an expansive character, and that has been highlighted by Lenin, who famously remarked that imperialism is the high stage of capitalism. So nothing new about globalization, rather it all shows that this is the expansive nature of global capital that would continue throughout the world, and it was there, it is there, and it will continue in the future also. The third account of globalization is what is called transformationalist perspective, which seeks to locate globalization in a more historical framework and has become the prominent explanation of globalization. So if you look at this perspective, most of the arguments given by this perspective clearly shows that the most acceptable explanation of globalization. It conceives globalization as a spatial process whereby various forms of human activity increasingly are traversing the world and connecting people in different parts of the world in a more quickly and densely manner than in the previous time. So the point is, if you look at the movement of the people, the movement of the ideas, the movement of the goods, the movement of the services, they are going in a very fast way, and in a way they are affecting important aspects of our life and connecting the people in different parts of the world more closely and more densely. In this process, national borders are transcended on a regular basis by various flows of resources, people and ideas. So in this process of integration, this process of interconnectedness, the people, the ideas, the goods, the services, they are all helping to integrate the world, make the world more and more integrated. It is important to emphasize that this account contains that globalization is multifaceted process, in that it is not restricted to the economic arena only. Rather, people increasingly are affected by various forms of economic, cultural and political activity. So basically the argument is, it's when we talk of globalization, it is not just about the economic sphere, rather there are globalization in areas such as cultural sphere, political sphere. So it's a kind of phenomena that is affecting all aspects of our life. Maybe it is political, maybe it is cultural, maybe it is economy. So we should not make the mistake of understanding globalization just as an economic activity or an economic process only. Equally important, this position also argues that globalization is not just a novel phenomena of the late 20th century, rather the phenomena of globalization started since colonialism, since imperialism, since the Second World War, and it has just been consolidated in the early 1990s. There are three main political implications of this partial process for world politics. First, while nation states remain important actors in world politics, global connections and the development of communication technology have empowered a range of transnational actors to operate in politically significant ways. So, the first impact of globalization we can say is the impact of the non-state actors which are influencing the world politics or the working of world politics in a very substantial way, and this phenomena has been facilitated, or this has emerged out of the information technology revolution or revolution in communication technology that has empowered these kind of actors to play such a significant role. Clearly, globalization had made it easier to develop civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations that promote and disseminate certain political values, but it has also made it possible for terrorist groups and other organized crimes syndicates to transfer people, resources and harm across national borders. So, on the one hand we find important international organizations, supranational organizations, civil society organizations, transnational corporations, those who are contributing in a positive way to the process of globalization. But on the other hand, we also find some other actors like the violent non-state actors, terrorist organizations, organized crime syndicates, those who transfer people, resources and harm the nation state and communities. Second, globalization leads to global connections and ramifications that are more authentically transnational and universal. Indeed, political communities and civilizations can no longer be characterized simply as discrete worlds. So nowadays, globalization process has made it possible for closely connecting different countries, different communities, different continents. So you can't say this part is a different part, it has no relationship with the other part. So if there is a problem in America, you feel the consequences in India. If there is a problem in China, you feel the consequences of India. If there is a problem in India, you feel the consequences in Pakistan. So everything has become interconnected. So you don't have a separate geographical entity. You don't have a separate identity. You can say, you can't claim that you are not affected or your identity is not affected by the process of globalization. However, these overlapping forces are often uneven and have greater local or regional implications for some people or some states. So it is true that different parts of the world, they have become more closely interconnected with each other, but the impact of the globalization process is not even for different states, different communities and different people. Consequently, the lines between foreign and domestic policy have become hazy due to the intense and widespread forms of global integration and connection. So, the earlier distinction between this is domestic policy, this is international policy, this has all become hazy because each influences the other and each is influenced by the other. This leads on issues such as terrorism, organized crime and environmental impact that intersect national borders and thereby can only be addressed by elaborate international collaboration. So nowadays, because of the transnational character of the threat, all nations, they have definitely become interdependent, but at the same time they have also become vulnerable, as the case of COVID proved that if there is any problem in China, the whole world was affected and the social, political and economic life was almost devastated during those 2 years period of time. So the point is now because of this globalization process, so there are many issues such as terrorism, environmental issue, organized crime issue that intersect the national borders with that of the international border. So you can't say you are not affected by these problems. Nowadays all countries, all continents, all people, they are all affected by the transnational nature of global threats. Third, as a result of the issues we discussed, there are increasingly complex forms of international and transnational cooperation that has become now referred to as global governance. So, instead of the earlier international governance model that looked after the interest of the states only, now what we can say, because of the process of globalization, we have reached at a stage when we talk about global governance, a set of rules and regulations that is not just decided by the states, rather there are international organizations, civil society organizations, supranational organizations, the transnational corporations, they have all become the part of the global governance model that has become important for countries, communities and the people. So, the point is, we have reached at a stage where we do not say it is about international governance or a governance meant for the states only, rather it is a global governance that affects our lives, our activities, everything have been touched by this global governance model. Thus, the points we discussed that has created a kind of situation in which the nation states can be assumed to be the only major political actor in issues like security, economic prosperity or environmental sustainability. So, other non-state actors, other international actors, they have also become important actors in issues like security, economic prosperity or environmental sustainability. It is now the case that the international and intergovernmental forms of organizations such as the United Nations, the group of 21 regional bodies like the European Union and non-public bodies like the transnational corporations, business councils, civil society organizations are all increasingly important to understand the enactment of policy making at the global governance level. So, as I said, the states are important, the non-state actors are important, international organizations are important. So, they have all become important for global policy making, and that is why. So, instead of the earlier model of governance, now we are talking of global governance that looks after the interest of all parties, all stakeholders. It is important to be aware that some scholars are skeptical about the incidence or the significance of these spatial implications of globalization. However, skeptics claim that power of the state is still largely intact to demonstrate the power of the state. So, basically there are differences. Now, to what extent other actors have become important, but those who criticize the globalization process, they think that in spite of the globalization process, in spite of the increasing interdependence, states are the most important actor in international politics. Even the transformationalist scholars argue that globalization is not a monolithic force. Different states and groups of people are affected by global integration in different ways. So, the point is globalization it has affected all aspects of our life, there is no doubt about it, but its benefit is not even, or its consequences are not even. Different people have been affected by the process of globalization differently. However, there are also scholars who believe that while the spatial implications of contemporary global integration may be largely correct, they ignore any examination of the ideas and interests that are dominating and championing the contemporary shape of global economic integration. So, the problem is not only that there has been an uneven impact of globalization, uneven outcome of globalization to different states, different communities, rather there has been less discussion or less examination of the consequence of the global movement of ideas and interest, and those sometimes those ideas and those interests glorify the contemporary shape of global economic integration. Sometimes they glorify the neo liberal policies that largely benefits the western developed countries. So, the point is everything is fine, but the question is who gets what kind of benefit out of the globalization process. That is still a big question to consider. Some critically minded scholars emphasize the importance of neoliberal and free market capitalist ideologies and policies that is shaping the way the global economy has developed since 1970s. So, basically those who glorify the benefits of globalization, those who glorify the concept of globalization, they are particularly emphasizing the importance of neoliberal ideas and free market capitalist ideologies and policies. They don't see or they don't want to see the negative implications of these kind of policies. So that is an issue that we are all concerned with, or all should be concerned with. To summarize the meaning of globalization, globalization is basically a historical process characterized by many things. First, the stretching of social, political and economic activities across national frontiers, such as events, decisions and actions in one region of the world that have the potential to impact directly and indirectly on individuals, communities and countries in distant regions of the globe. So, as I said, no part of the world, no country, no continent, no community, they are immune from the process of globalization, because so in a way there is a stretching of these social, political and economic activities, and we are all going to be affected, and we have already been affected by the process of globalization. Second, the intensification of interconnectedness, that almost affect every aspect of our modern life, from the economic to the ecological, from the global presence of Google to the spread of harmful microbes such as COVID virus or SARS virus or Ebola virus. So this has been another characteristics of globalization, another major impact of globalization, that all are now interconnected, all parts of the world are interconnected. So if there is anything good, a trickling effect goes on, or you are all impacted by that development. Similarly, the problems are also globalized, the issues are also globalized, the harmful effects of globe, it is also universalized. So the problem is globalization has intensified the interconnectedness of all the countries, all the peoples, and in a way you find Google, you can think of a laptop, a desktop without Google or without using Google. And similarly, you look at any economic activity, any kind of ecological issues, there is always a presence of all the ideas, all the techniques, all the tools emerging from different countries, and our life has been greatly affected by this, the global presence of McDonald's, you have Google, you have Coca-Cola, you have Apple. You might have seen that whenever there is a new model launched by Apple phone, how the website gets crashed. So everybody has become now mad for many things, maybe mobile, maybe laptop, maybe any other thing. So the point is, these are all important effects of globalization, important impact of globalization. The third is the accelerating pace of global flows and processes at the velocity with which ideas, news, goods, information, capital and technology circulate the world increases. So basically, if you look at the pace in which the ideas, the news, the goods, the information or even the capital or technology they travel, that has been a major process of globalization, major impact of globalization, and the movement of these things that have transformed the way we understood the world at an earlier period. And the last is the deepening enmeshment of the local and global, such that the domestic and international are now indistinguishable. So the point is, because we are all affected by the globalization process, so the earlier distinction between the local, the global, the domestic politics, the international politics, they have all become outdated, they have all become hazy, and this is, you can say, the way globalization process operates at all levels. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. We discussed that the term globalization has entered common usage in mid-1990s and has become a central issue in public debates in most countries around the world. We discussed globalization from three perspectives: the hyper-globalization perspective, the skeptical perspective, and the transformationalist perspective. We summarize that globalization is a historical process characterized by the stretching of social, political, and economic activities across national frontiers, the intensification of interconnectedness in almost every sphere of modern life, and accelerating the pace of global flows and processes, and the deepening enmeshment of the local and the global. In the next lecture, we will discuss the characteristics and impact of globalization on international politics. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.